Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today, I am going to be doing the 8 Memories tag. I was tagged by my friend Alan at Alan's Reads, and Alan was tagged by the creator of the tag. This is a new and original tag just created by Paul at the Accidental Bookseller. This is what Paul said in his video. He said, "What are 8 books that you see on your shelf or that you remember reading where the sight evokes powerful memories regarding moments in your life or key experiences?" Similar to when you hear a song and it transports you in memory to a key moment or period in your life, what 8 books do the same for you and why? It's carte blanche on how much information someone wishes to impart or not. It's an opportunity to give subscribers a little more detail on how lives connect to books via experience. Also, it gives listeners to our book memories more information about us for when we are no longer here to tell them. Well, thank you, Paul, for creating this new and original tag, and thank you, Alan, for tagging me. I thought this sounded really interesting, and it was hard to keep my list to 8 books. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is a book that I've shown on the channel before, but I've never told the story of the memory behind this book. This is Louisa May Alcott's Little Women. And this is the abridged version that my mother bought for me and gave to me in the summer when I was 8 years old. And you know, I've always remembered that this was my mother's favorite childhood book, and that it was very important to her to give me this book, which I read that summer. But I don't think I've ever shared the memory of, you know, what prompted her to go out and buy the book for me. I had been riding my bicycle that day with my best friend Kathy, and we were flying up and down my street, mostly because it was sort of a slow hill. And I don't know, we had been doing it all morning long, and we came flying down the hill, and I hit a sewer grate on the side of the road, and I wiped out horribly. I went flying off that bicycle and really messed up my knees and one elbow, and I was I was a mess, and there was blood everywhere, and I could barely walk, and and my friend Kathy, you know, picked up my bicycle and helped me to get up, and she walked my bicycle home while I, you know, screamed and cried, I think, all the way home. And I lived at the very top of the hill, so we had to, you know, get the bicycles up, up the hill, and get me up the hill. And she took me to my mother, who I think was horrified at what came through her back door, because I really hurt myself badly. And I just remember that, you know, she thanked Kathy for getting me home, and she, you know, was cleaning my wounds. I remember I had the biggest Band-Aid I've ever seen in my life on one knee, and my mother would say later that she probably really should have taken me, you know, to a doctor. I probably should have had stitches in that knee. It was, she said, there was just blood everywhere. It was more than just a skinned knee, and I had a scar on that knee for years and years. But that day, I mean, my mother had me sort of propped up on her bed in her room, because there was air conditioning in that room, and my room didn't have air conditioning, and she turned the AC on for me, and she bought me this book that day. It was sort of a consolation prize, I guess, for my for my troubles, and I just remember staying, with my leg propped up and reading the book for the rest of that day and into the night. So that is actually that memory is closely tied with Little Women and my first reading of that book. Now, my second book that is also associated with a memory, related to my mother, is this particular volume from the Bobsy Twins, and this was the Bobsy Twins and the Secret of Candy Castle. And I remember getting this book. It was a Christmas gift, but I remember that my mother gave it to me on Christmas Eve because the idea was that if I started to read, I would be more likely to read myself to sleep, and that I would be able to get to sleep because it was Christmas Eve, and little kids have trouble getting to sleep on Christmas Eve. And I specifically, I had many of the books from this series, and read them throughout my childhood, but I specifically remember getting the Secret of Candy Castle on Christmas Eve, one Christmas. And I thought that was, thinking about it later, it was really an ingenious idea of my mother's, to help us to get to sleep on Christmas Eve. Another book that I don't think I've ever talked about on the channel before. So I'm going from the Bobsy Twins to John Milton, The Complete Poems and Major Prose. And this is a book that I have had since college. See all of my annotations. And the reason I have a powerful memory associated with this book is, well, actually, it's associated with my father. I took a course on Milton the summer before my senior year in college. I had read Milton in a couple of other classes in my sophomore and junior years of college. And then I took this seminar this one summer. So when I went back for my senior year, I decided that I was going to write my senior thesis on John Milton. And I was writing away furiously and working on it all through the fall of my senior year. And I hit this terrible slump. I just went up against a wall, and I was convinced that I was not going to be able to finish the thesis, that I didn't know what I was talking about, that everything I had written up to that point was not worthy of a senior thesis. And I went home for the weekend, which was not something that I did because it wasn't easy to do. I went to college many states away from where I lived. I didn't have a car. To get home by bus was an 8-hour bus ride. But somehow, I did get home that particular weekend. And I remember sitting up talking about Milton with my father. And we talked well into the night. We talked for hours about what I was trying to write. He had me just talk about it. Just tell me what you're trying to write. Tell me what Tell me what where you're stuck. And I talked through it with him. And eventually, he went to bed and I went up to my room and I started to write. And I wrote through the night. And when I went back to school, I guess that Sunday I went back to school, I knew that I had written my way through the slump thanks to my father, thanks to this conversation with my father. And so, I shortly thereafter finished the thesis, and I dedicated it to my father, and I opened the thesis with a quote from Milton's Ad Patrem, and wrote my own dedication as well to my father. And he never saw the finished version of the thesis. He passed away during my senior year, and he never saw the dedication. One of my aunts did tell him about it. Because she saw it, she told him that it was dedicated to him, so he knew, but he never saw it, and he was not able to read it. But I can't look at John Milton, the complete. I cannot look at this volume, the complete poems and major prose of John Milton, without thinking of my father, and I imagine they will always be connected in my memory. Okay, this is going to be a quick one. Number 4 is John Knowles' A Separate Piece, and this is a very, very old edition of the novel. And the reason I am including this is because I can't think about this novel without thinking about the very beginnings of my teaching career. This was the first novel that I taught when I was student teaching, again in my senior year of college. This book, this particular copy, was given to me by my cooperating teacher. This was one of the school issued books. So it was already old when I got it. And then, here I was teaching my first novel ever to 10th graders. So it's completely marked up by me. And it's completely falling apart. Every page is coming out of it. It's in sections, but I can't part with it. I have certainly had newer, cleaner copies, and I taught. Well, I taught from this one, for many years, but I also taught from a newer, cleaner copy. But I can't part with this because this is where my teaching career began. Okay. Number 5, I have talked about this book on the channel before. This is a memoir. It's by Gail Caldwell, and it's called Let's Take the Long Way Home, a memoir of friendship. And this is a book that Gail Caldwell wrote about her friendship with the writer Caroline Knapp. They formed a friendship that was built largely around walking their dogs, and they would always say to each other, so that they could continue the conversation, "Let's take the long way home," so they could keep talking. And she wrote this in the year or so after Caroline Knapp's death from cancer. And I was introduced to this book, and I read this book for the first time when my dear friend and colleague Linda Thomas passed away also from cancer. And I found great solace in this memoir. Linda was my colleague. We worked together for 25 years, and we were best friends in the department. And in our office, she always sat next to me. She was about 18 years older than I, so she was very much a big sister and a mother figure, as well as my dearest friend. And so every time I look at this book, I think of Linda, and I remember Linda. And I'm just going to throw in an extra book because this goes with that. After she died, we had a lot of her materials. She had retired shortly before she died, and left a lot of her materials for the person who was replacing her, who became my dear friend Juliet, and she left a lot of her materials for me as well. And this was her copy of Great Expectations, and she wrote her last name all around the book. And so from that time on, I taught this novel from Linda's copy. Okay, next. I have definitely talked about Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte on many occasions, and I have even shown this this edition. I have a couple of different editions of Wuthering Heights, and I've talked about this as a very, very important book in my sense of myself as a reader, in my becoming a serious reader, in my understanding that I was going to major in English in college, and that I was going to become an English teacher. But I don't know if I ever told the story, the memory of this this particular edition. I think I've shown the inside of the book, and I've shown that it is signed by my department, by everyone in my department, and that's because I was named Teacher of the Year, and my dear friend Juliet purchased this book for me from the department, and it was a gift from the whole department, and they've all written really, really lovely things to me. So, this book that helped me know that I was going to be an English major and that I was probably going to become an English teacher, it just kept coming back at many times in my life, and Juliet understood that and thought that this was a fitting gift for me the year I was named Teacher of the Year, and so it's an especially cherished edition of Wuthering Heights. Another book that I look at and I am immediately sort of hit with a number of significant memories is Maggie O'Farrell's Hamnet. I absolutely love this novel, and this was my introduction to Maggie O'Farrell, and I've since read many of her books. But the reason this one is so important is that when I first retired from teaching after almost 40 years, I found myself unable to read. And I have mentioned that on a couple of occasions on the channel. Here I was with all the time in the world, and I couldn't focus on reading. And I don't ever really remember that happening in my life before, because I read for a living, as a teacher. I had to read. I was always reading. But I was so upset by things that were happening to many of my friends, in the district that I had left, and I was just so preoccupied with things that were going on and things that I couldn't help, that I couldn't do anything about after being used to, being the go-to person and the person that, people came to, and I helped solve problems, and suddenly I couldn't quiet the noise in my mind. And I felt helpless. And that was when I discovered, for the very first time, audiobooks. And I listened to an audiobook of Hamnet while I read the text. And I had to do both together. If I just listened, I drifted. If I tried to read, I drifted. But reading while listening, first of all, taught me the importance of audiobooks, and I would never again take them for granted or look at them as less than reading. They saved me and my reading life. And it was this book that I listened to and read, and that's what got me started me on my way out of this terrible block to reading. So every time I look at this book, and every time I think about Maggie O'Farrell, that's the memory that comes to mind. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is certainly a book I've talked about many times, especially last year on the channel, and that's Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. And the reason I'm talking about it today is that this is a book that will always, I think, be attached to many, many really wonderful booktube memories. I've said jokingly that I thought I was the last person on earth to read Les Miserables, and I couldn't believe I had never read it or seen the movie or seen the musical or any of the versions of it, and I kid about that a lot. But what really made this important to me was that this was the very first booktube group event that I took part in, and we had a small Voxer group, and there were a couple of us who were reading this together. It was part of a larger read along. I think it was Classics and Company was doing the book that month, but we had a smaller Voxer chat where we were talking about the book, and it opened up this whole new world of booktube reading events and group chats, and I felt like I belonged to something. I felt a part of something. So those are my 8, it's probably a little more than 8, bookish memories. And I just really loved putting this together. And maybe you'll share some of your important bookish memories in my comments below. If you're watching this and this is something that you would like to do on your channel, I hope that you will take a look at the prompt in the notes below and do your version of it. I would love to see that. And as I usually do, I'm going to tag some people as well. Some other people that I think might enjoy doing this as well. So, as always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.